Today, it might be exactly the day that the designers of this hall had in mind when they came up with the idea of a glass wall at the back of a stage. It's a calm, beautiful, sunny day, a few clouds in the skies, and some boats just sitting out on the harbor there. You can look out, if you're right up against the window, on people playing on the beach. It gives it a really nice summertime feeling, and it connects this hall to the natural world outside, exactly what the designers had in mind. When you look inside the hall, and you can see this on the video at our website, 995allclassical.org, you can see inside the hall, and you'll see there stone walls. You might even think in your neighborhood, depending on where you live, there are some flat stone walls that maybe surround people's houses, and that's the kind of stone you see on the walls here in the Shilin Liu Performance Center. In addition to that stone, there's a warm wood that envelops the hall. There's a woven pattern to it as well, and that allows the hall to have a very beautiful and inviting feeling. In fact, well, one friend of mine described it as being in the middle of a salad bowl because it's so beautiful and warm, a very chic salad bowl, we might say. But it's also a great place to hear music, and we discovered that on opening night here at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival in June, and now we have the chance to hear one of the world's great pianists, Marc-Andre Hamelin, in concert here on the Steinway. David DeVoe is entering the stage now, and he's the artistic director of the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. He has just a few words to say to the audience who've just finished watching that film that I mentioned. And again, if you'd like to see that film yourself, you can do so at our website, 995allclassical.org. And by the way, when you go there, you can also find the playlist, and in the playlist there's a link to the text for a poem by Wolfgang von Goethe, the Erlkönig. It's a piece that, or rather a poem you may recognize as a piece that Schubert set to music. Well, that's also the basis for one of the etudes that Marc-Andre Hamelin has written. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later in the program today at intermission when we have a chance to talk to Marc-Andre Hamelin. But for now, if you want to head to that website, you can find the text and have it there right in front of you. Mark says it's a very faithful setting of that very famous German text, the Erlkönig. Well, Marc-Andre Hamelin is getting ready to come on stage right after David DeVoe has finished addressing the audience. And in fact, I believe they're acknowledging some of the important people that have put together this beautiful performance space. If you have a chance to visit Rockport, you might not even notice the center at first glance. It fits in very well along the street in downtown Rockport. It sits right across the street from the Art Association of Rockport. That is the former location of the Rockport Chamber Music Center, or rather, Rockport Chamber Music Festival. And in fact, it was a beautiful place to do concerts for a long time, but very limited too. A small space, very intimate. It allowed audiences to connect with the music very directly, but it also had a lot of limitations in what kind of music was presented and really in the number of audience that were available to take advantage of it. Now with the Shilin Liu Performance Center, the world is open in possibility to the Rockport Chamber Music Festival, and I think David DeVoe, the artistic director, and Tony Beadle, the executive director, have a lot of great ambitions in mind for this new landmark concert hall here on the North Shore of Massachusetts. Well, here's Marc-Andre Hamelin entering the stage now, and we'll begin the concert live from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival with Alban Berg's Piano Sonata, Opus 1. Alban Berg's Piano Sonata, Opus 1. That was pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin, live from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival here on 99.5, Boston's all-classical station. Marc-Andre Hamelin returning to the stage for a second bow after that very intense, if somewhat calm, late romantic piece by Alban Berg. Quite an experience to hear Alban Berg's music while watching a beach outside. Well, from that compact but very powerful emotional punch, Marc-Andre Hamelin's going to turn to one of those larger expressions from the Romantic era now with this Piano Sonata in B minor by Franz Liszt. It's from 1853 when Liszt was pushing the boundaries on the sonata form, and that led him to take the traditional three movements usually found in a sonata and fuse them together into a single uninterrupted piece of about 30 minutes long with three main sections plus a concluding coda. It's anchored by a series of three different themes that return throughout the piece. It's not unlike Wagner's way of treating themes in his operas, but without telling a necessarily explicit story. Coming up at intermission, Marc-Andre Hamelin will have a few thoughts and reflections that you can hear about this particular piece. It's a massive piece that Marc only began really taking on in the last couple of years. It's a staple of the repertoire, but for him, he needed to wait for the right time, and clearly now is the right time. In fact, he'll be heading to the recording studio to offer this as a commercial CD in the near future. But for now, it's a live performance from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. Marc-Andre Hamelin now back on stage at the Sheldon Lee Performance Center here in Rockport for the Piano Sonata in B minor by Franz Liszt. The Piano Sonata in B minor by Franz Liszt is an incredibly emotional journey. It also is such a singular creation that there's a lot of debate about how the piece is even structured, how you even approach it as a pianist. It takes a pianist with a solid mind, a real coherent approach, and not to mention technique to burn. Those are two of the hallmarks with Marc-André Hamelin in pretty much everything he plays. But here for today, it's the Piano Sonata in B minor by Franz Liszt, now getting a standing ovation at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival, coming to you live from the Shalin Performance Center here in Rockport. And a remarkable performance in a remarkable hall here, brought to you live on 99.5, Boston's all-classical station. Marc-André Hamelin returning to the stage for this continued standing ovation. Cutting the line between formal and casual with a dark suit but open collar shirt. Marc-André Hamelin looking very comfortable, but also very much in control of the Piano Sonata in B minor by Franz Liszt. Well, coming up, it's a conversation with Marc-André Hamelin about this program during intermission. You'll hear some of his own thoughts about the piece you just heard, as well as some descriptions of his own etudes, which are on the second half of the program here at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. I'm Brian McCreath, and this live broadcast is coming to you from the Shalin Liu Performance Center in Rockport, Massachusetts.
Support for 99.5 All Classical comes from you.
And from Celebrity Series of Boston.
It's for people who don't want to consume artistic junk food.
Jack Wright, Director of Marketing and Communications.
It's the kind of thing that makes you, when you pull into the driveway, makes you stay in the car longer than you planned on. That's the kind of thing we want communicated that we represent. 99.5 is helping us to present to this audience.
To learn more, call 617-300-5500.
If you like this, then you gotta hear this. There's so much great music, and now more time. 99.5, Boston's all-classical station.
Welcome back to a live broadcast from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival here on 99.5, Boston's all-classical station. I'm Brian McCreath. We're at the halfway point of a concert being given by pianist Marc-André Hamelin at the new and very beautiful Shalin Liu Performance Center overlooking the bay here in Rockport. Today's program has featured a fascinating variety of pieces, including the late Romantic sonatas by Alban Berg and Franz Liszt that you just heard. And coming up on the second half of the program, we have a few of Debussy's preludes, as well as some of Marc-André Hamelin's own remarkable etudes in minor keys. Well, Marc-André Hamelin is not only a terrific pianist, he's also a really fun person to talk with, and I recently had the chance to do just that. Looking over today's pieces and on today's program, I asked him about how he begins to put a program like this together.
It often stems from maybe one work, or which will be possibly the central work in that particular program. The program which I'm offering at Rockport, I think really has as its core the Liszt B minor sonata. Everything is sort of around it. I thought the Berg sonata that I'm prefacing it with is a very interesting choice because it's in the same key, although it's a very, very different piece, and it's also a very, very different use of the tonality of B minor.
I happen to know from a certain experience that you played Liszt's B minor sonata at Liszt's home in Budapest recently.
Yes, of course.
Was there some special quality to encountering those instruments in that space that informed your playing of his music?
Well, it was in a rather small room, but in these times, one didn't play to very, very, very large spaces on the whole. This was in a museum space, which was not very large, so that particular piano was, I think, well situated. And the funny thing is that I've always thought that pianos of the period had very, very light actions, but this actually felt rather normal compared to today's standards. What did not surprise me, however, was the tone, which was, like a lot of instruments of the period, not dry at all. I mean, there's a lot of resonance. The damping action then, I think, was not what it is now.
Does that change how you play Liszt's music? Does it
I'm sure it would. I just don't have experience with these instruments, but it does force you to adjust tempi slightly, you know, and to adopt a more spacious perspective, perhaps, in your interpretations.
So back to the program for Rockport, though. You have Berg and Liszt, and then Debussy seems a little bit out of the blue, but is that just me? I don't know.
It's a personal preference.
Yeah.
I wanted to feature some of my music in one of these programs, one of these two programs that I built for last season. I just thought, I suppose, you know, that the Debussy preludes, besides being pieces that I really adore, were at the very, very least, and they are much more than that, of course, pretty good palate cleansers. When I discovered the pleasure that I had in performing the second book of Debussy Preludes, I just asked myself why I had waited so long. As a matter of fact, I really, really did not like Debussy very much. I sort of, you know, poo-pooed it, you know, throughout my student years, because everybody was playing Debussy, and I just got sick of it. And then when you rediscover it on your own, that's when everything changes. I feel that even at my age, I could still surprise myself by sitting down at the piano and actually reading some pieces that I've heard all my life but never actually read. When you sit at the piano, it's a different thing. And sometimes you even tell yourself, oh my God, and you look at the score, that's what this is supposed to sound like.
The most familiar music has a way of surprising us at times.
And in certain cases, for a certain repertoire, it's turned me around.
At what point did you change your thinking from, I'm a pianist who fiddles around with putting together some pieces of music sometimes, to, I'm a composer of piano pieces?
It still hasn't come, I think. I'm a pianist who writes. I mean, I don't use the word composer, really. You know, I happen to have a certain creative need. I've always had it, actually. From the very, very first time I had piano lessons, I felt the need to scribble on manuscript paper, whatever the result was. And of course, you can imagine that at the beginning the result was just pretty awful. Not only awful, but meaningless, because I didn't know how to notate, and the quality of the ideas, well, let's pass on that.
Oh, I bet they were charming.
I didn't write anything usable until I got maybe 18 or 19 years old.
And so that makes me wonder, is the drive to compose pieces like these etudes comes then, I guess, from simply wanting to have your music to play on programs, or is there something more?
That's quite true. I don't think one has to go deeper than that.
There's no leaving of a legacy, anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I was very, very pleased, overjoyed even, that C.F. Peters wrote me a letter out of the blue wanting to publish these etudes. I hadn't solicited anything at all. I expected these pieces to circulate among pianists and interested parties for the rest of my life, and as they have been. But here comes this offer to publish all 12. And, of course, I couldn't say no.
The etudes that you've chosen for this particular program must, I don't know, are they, is it fair to say that they're amongst your favorites of the set?
Not necessarily, although, I mean, I have a fondness for them all, and perhaps in varying degrees. The really, really difficult ones I think I like a little less. I wanted, I think, above all, to have a good pairing, a good juxtaposition, and a good progression. And I think that group is, you know, to my mind, is quite satisfactory.
The first of those etudes that's on today's program is Erlkönig, which has, as you say in your program notes, nothing to do with Schubert.
That's right.
It's completely based on the Goethe poem. It
is actually a setting. If there were a voice there, I mean, it would be a setting of the poem, a bona fide setting. The only license I allowed myself was to repeat the first 4 lines for musical reasons. I just wanted the first phrase twice. I mean, it fit better that way. But otherwise, you could sing to it. And it's particularly interesting to play it for German audiences because I can't tell you how many times they've told me I was able to follow every syllable of the poem. Because, of course, in Germany, everyone can recite this. You know, it's as familiar as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So it's particularly gratifying to play this in Germany.
This is a poem in which a young boy is being carried through the night by his father. The young boy has these hallucinations, I guess we would call them in
Fever
modern
dreams.
times, fever dreams,
Yeah.
of seeing death coming to get him.
In the guise of the Earl King.
Right. And then at the very end, the father arrives and the boy
It's
is
too
dead.
late. Yeah, it's too late and the child dies.
So you were literally thinking of the words as you composed the music.
Oh, yes. I text painted as much as I could. I mean, there are things that I did which I don't think can be perceived consciously. I mean, just the colors, modulations. At one point, right after the second hallucination, you hear the Earl King, you know, I will dance and rock you and whatever. And then after that he says, mein Vater, my father. And what I did is to decrease the level of the Erlkönig and increase the level of the child as the child is waking up from the dream. So the dynamics are different in each hand.
Is that
That's a very, I mean, it goes by in a flash, of course, but I thought it was necessary. It was a particularly interesting way to illustrate this.
Como Berenices is the second etude. It's number 2, and it comes second in the group that you have for today. And there's an allusion to a queen of Egypt.
Yeah, but it's just a nice sounding title, so let's skip to the next one. That's all it is, really. Don't look too deeply.
Well, and the next one is after Tchaikovsky. It's for the left hand only.
Yeah, it's an arrangement of one of his songs for voice and piano called Lullaby, which is as well known in Russia as the Goethe's Erlkönig is known in Germany. I mean, even a man on the street can sing it to you with the words. But it's not particularly well known here, I suppose, simply because it's the song is in Russian. But it's beautiful. It's really, really gorgeous.
What is it about composing for one hand? I mean, is that something that a pianist sort of takes more seriously than a person listening to the music? Or is there something about the way a listener hears it that's different when something is only being played in one hand?
Well, I think the main attraction for writing for the left hand alone or for one hand is to make one hand sound like two.
And so the way that you feel about this left hand etude that you've written is that it does have that thickness of texture that maybe a listener wouldn't know that you're playing with one hand.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the origin of this etude, I originally planned 2 versions of it. One would have been the left hand study as you will hear it, and another version would have been, again, that version, but with a superimposed right hand part coming somewhere along the way. But I quickly found that would be total overkill, and the left hand version was just good enough on its own.
The last 2 that you're playing today, a minuet and then a prelude and fugue. I'll just sort of give this away to our audience that the minuet is the last that you've written.
Yeah.
And the prelude and fugue was the first.
That's right,
that you wrote.
yeah.
But then you also say just musically that it's not just a sort of clever thematic thing to put them together. It's that musically they work together.
I hope so. I started the prelude with a 4-note phrase back 24 years ago. And I finish the minuet, the last etude to be written, with the same 4-note phrase, although harmonized differently. But when these 2 phrases are heard, one after the other, it's very obvious that, of course, they're related.
When you're composing your pieces, is this something that, people especially who have never composed, they may not really have a picture of what happens? I mean, are you sitting at a piano, or do you sit just at a desk, or how do the notes get on the page for you?
I am fortunate enough to have enough of an inner hearing capacity that I can write without a piano. I think if I wrote with a piano, if I helped myself, I could still do it, but I'd probably write something very, very different. Of course, I always check myself because I don't always hear internally in the correct way, and there's some things that I have, some deficiencies that I haven't noticed at the moment of just writing, and then I go to the piano and I say, oh no, it's not right. Frequently, actually, I play on the piano and it sounds even better than what I had envisaged. So that's great. That's the best possible situation.
That's got to be a good feeling.
Oh yeah.
But so can we imagine you writing your music while you're on an airplane or
I've
while you're in a
frequently
restaurant?
done so. Yeah, I've given up on trains because it's too wobbly. But yeah, hotel rooms, at home, whatever. It's certainly, anywhere I can put a piece of music paper down.
So now that we have 12 minor keys accounted for in their etudes, is there more compositional work coming from Marc-Andre Hamelin?
Oh, I'm always sketching, if not on paper, at least in my head, and no one knows what's going to come out. There is going to be a recording coming out in September of these etudes, this set of etudes, along with other pieces that I wrote at various times.
And it's on the Hyperion label, the label that you've been recording for quite a long time.
Yes.
Well, Marc-Andre Hamelin, thanks for stopping by today. It's been great to talk with you.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
That's pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin, and I'm Brian McCreath, coming to you live from the Shalin Liu Performance Center in Rockport, Massachusetts. The second half of Hamelin's concert here at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival is coming up in a few minutes. Before that, let's return to the recording that Mark just mentioned. It's a CD on the Hyperion label, and it's completely devoted to Marc-Andre Hamelin's own compositions. It's coming out in September, and here is one of those pieces. It's from another set of pieces called Con Intissimo Sentimento. This is After Pergolesi. That's a short piece taken from a collection called Con Intimissimo Sentimento. The piece itself called After Pergolesi, written by Marc-Andre Hamelin and indeed performed by pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin. It comes from a new recording on the Hyperion label that will be available in September, so do keep your eyes out for that. I'll be back in a minute or so with the second half of this afternoon's concert from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. I'm Brian McCreath, and this live broadcast is coming to you from the Shalin Liu Performance Center in Rockport, Massachusetts.
99.5 All Classical comes from you and from Nova Scotia Tourism. For decades, people from around the world have been drawn to Nova Scotia. They come to discover their family's roots, but find so much more. They hike the rugged highlands and admire the breathtaking landscape. They make new friends at Akeli while dancing to traditional Celtic tunes. 25 million North Americans can trace their roots to Nova Scotia, many of whom have settled in New England. Are you one of them? Learn more at novascotiaroots.com.
This is listener-supported 99.5, Boston's all-classical station, WCRB, Lowell, Boston. Also broadcasting on WNCK 89.5, Nantucket, WGBH 89.7, HD2, Boston, and online at 995allclassical.org.
Welcome back to a live broadcast from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. I'm Brian McCreath of 99.5, Boston's all-classical station. And pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin is just about set to begin the second half of this concert here at the Shalin Liu Performance Center in downtown Rockport. And this half begins with 3 selections from Book 2 of the Preludes by Claude Debussy, who wanted to write pieces that would conjure images of characters and places and scenes, but he didn't want the titles of these pieces to be too imposing. So he simply gave each of them a number, and then he wrote the descriptive names, which you might call a title, at the very end of the pieces in the music. Well, the 3 that Marc-Andre Hamelin has chosen for today include number 4, Les Fées sont d'exquises danseuses, or Fairies are exquisite dancers, Les Tiers alternés, or alternating thirds, and Feux d'artifice, or fireworks. The second of those titles might be the one that deserves a bit of explanation. Thirds in music refers to a particular interval. So when you play the first and third note of a scale, that's a third. Well, Debussy goes to town in this piece, showing us every conceivable way we might think about the interval of a third. Well, remember, if you head to our website, you can find more information about today's program, both in our playlist and on the homepage at 995allclassical.org. On our playlist for this program, you'll find a link there to a translation of Wolfgang von Goethe's Erlkönig, the poem on which Marc-Andre Hamelin based one of his etudes in minor keys, which are coming up in just a bit on this program. And you can also find this nice 8-minute video about the Shalin Liu Performance Center at our homepage. Again, that's at 995allclassical.org. And here is Marc-Andre Hamelin returning to the stage now to begin the second half of the concert with 3 of the preludes from Book 2 by Claude Debussy. three selections from the Book 2 of the Preludes by Claude Debussy, performed by Marc-Andre Hamelin in this live broadcast from the Shaolin Liu Performance Center in Rockport, the home of the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. Marc-Andre Hamelin began with Les Fées sont d'exquises danseuses, or Fairies are exquisite dancers, went on to Les Tiers alternés, alternating thirds, and Feux d'artifice, fireworks. And if you were with us at intermission, you heard Marc-Andre Hamelin describe some of the 12 etudes in all the minor keys, pieces that he himself has written over several years. And now you can hear those pieces, beginning with Erlkönig after Goethe, and then Como Berenices. Hamelin continues with After Tchaikovsky, or For the Left Hand Alone, and a Minuetto, which is the most recently composed of these pieces, and then finally Prelude and Fugue, which was the very first of these etudes in minor keys that he wrote. And by the way, a recording of the entire set of the 12 etudes in all the minor keys will be released on a Hyperion CD in September. And if you are a very adventurous pianist, you might want to take on a new challenge and buy the sheet music, which also becomes available in September from the publisher C.F. Peters. And remember, if you want to see the words for Erlkönig, the poem that inspired Marc-Andre Hamelin, you can find it at our playlist today, 995allclassical.org. And you'll see a link there in today's playlist for a translation of Goethe's poem. Here's Marc-Andre Hamelin back for these 5 of the 12 etudes in all the minor keys, music that he himself wrote. Marc-Andre Hamelin live from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival.
A few seconds ago, actually since I last saw you, I took a look at the program and realized that you don't know what I'm about to play. I will be playing 5 of my own etudes. In the order, it'll be number 8, 2, 7, 11, and 12. Sorry for the confusion.
That prelude and fugue ends a set of 5 of the 12 etudes in all the minor keys written by Marc-Andre Hamelin and performed for this sold-out audience at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival and performed for you as well here on 99.5. Those 5 etudes from his set of 12 in all the minor keys began with Erlkönig after Goethe, continued with Coma Berenices, and then after Tchaikovsky for the left hand alone, a minuetto, and then that prelude and fugue. You can look for Hamelin's recording of all 12 of those etudes, along with more of his music, on the Hyperion label in September. And it's also when you have a chance to buy the sheet music for those pieces. The audience is giving Marc-Andre Hamelin now a standing ovation here in the beautiful Shaolin-Du Performance Center. They're not only giving him a standing ovation, but maybe the spectacular setting as well, with the setting sun offering a particularly reflective glow on the water outside as we look on the bay here in Rockport. Marc-Andre Hamelin returning to the stage now, a very intimate performance space here with some of the audience able to literally look down right over the pianist's shoulders in the balcony right above him, and then others sitting right before him. It's a very lovely space and one that is acoustically true as well. Here's an encore by Marc-Andre Hamelin.
Now for something by a real master. I mean, it's difficult for me to think of a lovelier encore, yet it is never, ever played. It's by Leopold Godowsky. It's called The Gardens of Buitenzorg, and it's from his Java suite of 1924.
The encore that Marc-Andre Hamelin has just offered to this sold-out audience at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival comes from Leopold Godowski, The Gardens of Buitenzorg, from the Java Suite. As Mark introduced it, he noted that it's one of the most lovely pieces, but almost never played, so a nice treat for the audience here, live from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival. I want to thank you for being with us this evening, and thanks also to the production engineer for today's live broadcast, Alan Mattis. Thanks as well to our transmission engineer at our studios in Boston, Frank Cunningham. Marc-Andre Hamelin now once again accepting the standing ovation here at the Shaolin-Wu Performance Center. I want to thank the recording engineer here at the Rockport Chamber Music Festival, Tom Stevenson, and also the Rockport Artistic Director, David DeVoe, the Executive Director, Tony Beadle, and all the staff here at Rockport for their cooperation in making this live broadcast possible. Our production assistant was James David Jacobs, the producer was Alan McClellan, and the executive producer was John Solons. Support for tonight's live broadcast from the Rockport Chamber Music Festival comes from you and from Hannaford and Dumas Commercial Printers, fulfilling printing needs for New England businesses since 1976. I'm Brian McCreath, and thank you for joining us for this live broadcast from the Shaolin-Wu Performance Center, home of the Rockport Chamber Music Festival.
Support for 99.5 All Classical comes from you and from the Newport Music Festival, celebrating their 42nd season of chamber music in the Newport Mansions, July 9th through the 25th. This season has 65 chamber music concerts with an international family of artists, all set in the Newport Mansions of Rhode Island. The Newport Music Festival, July 9th through the 25th. To learn more or to buy tickets, you can visit newportmusic.org or call 401-849-0700. And from the Kaplan Joint Center at Newton Wellesley Hospital,